I should tell everybody to be quiet. Man. Okay.
There we go. Jan, your small worked, but Jennifer's long one didn't. Hi everybody, welcome back to another Tell Like It Was, the June edition with Donald Struckhoff. This is going to be interesting. Definitely going to be interesting. I thank you all for being here once again for the Tell It Like It Was series, and along with the Augusta History Museum, we work hand in hand with Paul to bring these stories to you. So if you've never been to a Tell Like It Was, this is how it goes. We ask a lot of questions. We encourage you to ask questions to Don, and we'll just see where it goes. I'm sure it'll be funny, and there'll be some laughs. Old memories brought up. But we're excited to do this. So what Paul had in mind was that we were going to have like a slideshow, kind of quick answers, and we'll just catch him in a couple pictures that he will be familiar with and a couple that maybe he's not, and get a good story out of it or a good laugh. So welcome. Thank you, Don. We the ancient dinosaurs.
Pretty far back.
Well, right off the bat, we got a good laugh.
In the beginning.
In the beginning. Thank you. So I guess we'll start with the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah. But Donald, can we start real quick with just giving an introduction of yourself so that we have that for...
My name is Donald Struckhoff.
We might have to move the microphone up just a little bit.
Okay, my name is Donald Struckhoff. And if you really want to know a lot, I was born on September 11th, 1941 in St. Francis Hospital in Washington. And that's a little bit unusual for the time because they wanted to be born, babies to be born at home like my older sister. But Rose Parks, who was a midwife for when my sister Joan was born, she told Mom, this one would be better off in the hospital. So they took me over to St. Francis Hospital in Washington. Well, this is not the last time Rose Parks shows up in our family time, and it had to do with Dad's car. It was a 1935 Chevrolet two-door sedan. And in 1935, that was the last year Chevrolet made cars that opened doors hinged from the rear. And this two-door was large, or the door was large. Well, this car had been owned by a doctor, and he found out that if he took the front seat, passenger seat out, and the back seat out, he could stuff a twin bed single in there, and you could transport a person laying down.
First ambulance.
So well, Dr. Clay, who was a local doctor, knew this other doctor. He knew this would work. So then, well, at our house we didn't have twin beds, but we had a studio couch that had a single mattress, and that was long enough, and it would fold out and make a bed, and you could remove that spring and back, and it had legs on it, and you could put that underneath that mattress. So now they had a mattress and a support, and they also had legs they could lower and raise the head, which is something that you've got a hard time doing even with the stretchers today, where you can't raise the whole patient up and down at one time. You can bend in the middle, but you can't do it straight. So the next time they had a woman in labor, they called Dad, and he did this. Well, I didn't remember the first time. I remember two other ones. Well, this is World War II, and we have when tires were rationed, and our car tires and our wagon tires are the same size. And our wagons, well, when tires get too bad to use on the road, they put them on the wagon, and when they blow out on the wagon, well, you get another one off the car. Well, the tires are rationed.
Donald, can I pause you real quick? I don't want the feedback here. I'm sorry. Let's do that so we're not distracted.
Are we allowed to ask questions here?
Yes. Is that better?
Does it work any better? Yeah. I think gives me deeper voice. Anyhow, tires are rationed, and well, you can, farmers could always get ration stamps, but finding the right size tire was a different story. You waited until they got shipped in and you got them. So what Dad wound up doing, when we didn't have enough tires to go around for the wagons in the car, he would take a tire off the car and put it on the wagon. He'd use it, and then Sunday or Saturday evening, he'd change it over, put it back on the car again, and Sunday or Monday morning, he'd take it off the car and put it back on the wagon. Well, you know that when babies come, they usually come at night. So the next time they call, we don't have tires on the car, they're on the wagon. So we have to change tires. Well, the first time, Dr. Clay didn't come right away, but he come later to help Dad change tires. The second time I remember him being there, because he was standing on the front porch and said, "Beta, get up, we need the car." And Dad said, "Yeah, we got to change the tire." And so he was, Dr. Clay held the lantern, and well, of course no electric tire pumps at the time, so his hand pumped up, and they got him to the hospital and everything, apparently. But I never have found out who these babies might have been, or whether the babies even survived. Mom and Dad could never say anything about it. They could have invented this healthcare privacy act. They didn't say that.
All right, so I'm almost guessing we're going to be here 4 hours. And I can tell already. But we have about 60 photos to go through.
Okay, all right.
So, but
Well,
real quick.
do you want to know who those people are?
Yes, I would like to know.
The man standing on the right is Florence Ellenbeck. His name is Sam. He played baseball and generally raised hell for a bunch of years. He dated a few of the women that passed away, and some, I don't believe. Oh yeah, he dated one of your aunts, did. Agnes, you know your aunt Agnes? Yeah. At one time.
So this was in 1938?
That's when they got married. The lady to the right is Otilla Struckhoff, and she married Clothesmire. That's Ron Clothesmire's mom, and Carol Dieter's mom, and let's see who else? Don Clothesmire. Morris Clothesmire's mom.
Do you know where that picture was taken, Donald?
It's off Photo Washington. Yeah,
Donald, I hate to ask you again, can we maybe button your shirt so we can get that microphone?
got to put them up higher.
No, if you button the button, then your microphone will stay in place. I'm sorry. Now it's gonna save it.
Okay, you think, Robert?
Right? Okay.
So, yeah, you're
I just want to make sure everyone can hear you because it's
I
gonna
was
be
going to say
good.
her.
you all right.
All right, that's my grandfather Struckhoff and Mary. She was a Dick House. She grew up at the farm that Jerry and John Kleesner have now, that right at the St. Charles Warren County line. Robert grew up on the bottom road. That house no longer exists where he grew up. But he did say that the old house that he lived in, he said he fell down the steps and broke his nose, and when he was like 14 years old. And he said the blood stain really got away pretty quick, but he said that grease stain from his nose stayed there a while. That's Henry Struckhoff is sitting to the right now. The ladies, I don't really know which is who. I can tell you who's there, but which one is which. It's hard to tell. Of course, it's Henry Struckhoff, and that's Clara, I think, between them. and that's Helena. She was a Feldman. Robert is standing to the left. And let's see, that is Emma. Yeah, that's Emma standing there. Leo, Martha, Fritz. Let's see, which one is?
And those are your great-grandparents, correct?
Yeah, Henry and Helena, great-grandparents, and let's see, Folkerding, Francis Folkerding, and Minnie Stokes.
Do you know whereabouts this picture was taken?
Yeah, that picture was taken at Henry's place, and that fence in the background was between their garden and the field behind it.
Nice.
And that picture was taken looking toward the south.
Okay, let's go next. Oh,
That is not my first communion day. Although that's a first communion picture.
oh,
First communion day, we did not have a camera.
So you
And if you look real close, you can tell that I'm not wearing socks because I could not fit my feet in those shoes anymore. This picture, if you look at the background, see, First Communion would be in May or April. You can see the growth. You can see the lima beans sitting back there. That ain't April, that's August.
this is all true.
So this is Mary Ann is the baby. Joan, Sister Charlotte, is a big girl. I'm next. Mark, and then George standing in front. The dog's name is Snooky.
And how old were you in that picture?
8.
8?
Well, actually, 7.
7.
That's graduation from 1955. I'm on the left, Clyde Volkerding standing in the middle, and Henry Hendersman standing on the right. Anna Schultz is lady.
And that was what church?
It was Immaculate Conception Church. The sister standing behind us there is Sister Philip.
Eighth grade graduation.
Now she can do that without touching you.
Are you referring to the switch?
That's the high school graduation. And that's Immaculate Conception grade school.
Still standing.
Any good stories from?
Well,
I'm sure there
I
are.
don't know whether this don't really have a lot to do with school, but we burned up a school bus one time.
There's a story.
Well, it actually started fire on Empty Road, right in front of where the house is there on the end of Empty Road, because Bookie 4 was the driver, and it was we had just made the turn off of Highway 94 onto Empty Road, and he shifted. This is a 36 Ford bus with a flathead, V8 flathead in it. And he shifted, and just as soon as he shifted, the thing said pop. And he shut it down just like that, and smoke come rolling out from under the dashboard. He grabbed the fire extinguisher, headed out the door, and Leo Kukum and John Aho was right after him. And this is a 36 Ford. It's the first year they had the opening, that hood that opened from the back. Otherwise, they'd always open from the side. Anyhow, that first year they didn't open very far, and he couldn't get at the fire with that fire extinguisher. So Leo and John jumped on the bumper and held that up while he went after the fire, which was on the back end of the motor block. We sat there. Well, the bus filled with smoke, and everybody bailed out. There wasn't that many kids on there because we had small chicken pox at the same time, and so we had maybe 3/4 load of kids on there. And anyhow, there we were. This was 20 after 3 in the afternoon, And well, they had to send somebody, this is the Friday before Thanksgiving, 1948. Anyhow, he sends one of the kids to the neighbors to call, and call Augusta Garage to come out, and so thought they'd bring a record. Record wasn't there, someplace else. And Pete Kemner comes out with a pickup truck and looks at it. Oh, I think we could probably get it running, but it's going to be something. So they worked on it a while, and what they finally did is all the wires were burnt on the back of the motor block, and smoke would hit coming out under the dash, and everything was cooked in there too. So anyhow, what they finally wound up doing was taking a hot wire from the battery right to the engine coil, and then and that thing luckily didn't have a key starter; it had a foot engaged starter, and they could get it started. Okay, now they told him we all got on the bus, and it was still smoky because it really had smoked it up. And we opened all the windows and headed home. But they told him before he left, said you don't have any lights at all, and you don't have brake lights, you don't have no headlights, and the sun has been going down. And then he said, and you can't stop it; it's going to keep on running. The only way to stop it is to put it in high gear and step on the brakes. So we made it home. So we didn't have another bus.
How old were you?
I was 8. No, I was not 8. I was younger than the first communion because we had these terrible Thanksgiving programs that they put on, and that was the last day of practice or something like that. Before that. And I never did like to be on stage ever since that time.
Or you are.
I'd rather be someplace else.
We're glad you're here. Okay.
But the reason why I really remember chicken pox is because I already had chicken pox. And I had gotten over it. Mark had it at the same time. And then what happened was when I got home that night, Mom said, what's happened to you? I said, well, the bus burned up. And she said, no, you're red. You're just as red as a meat. What's the matter with you? Well, they tried my temperature at 102. And chicken pox had come back. So then I was sick. Because I had 104 fever for about 3 days. So anyhow, you get that stuff in your mind when that happens. Okay.
Is it inside?
That wasn't a school story. That was just a
Good story.
Well, one thing we did have at school, we had the pond behind church. That thing wasn't near as deep then as what it is now, but we could ice skate on that thing because it was fairly shallow at that time. But the nuns didn't know how to figure out whether the ice was thick enough. But we talked to Father. Then he would call Uncle Felix, who was a trustee, and Uncle Felix would send Leonard to be to check the ice. So Leonard had been skating the night before, so he knew he could skate. Anyhow, but he still had to come. The 8th graders sit over the other side of school, and they want to know whether Leonard's come to check on the ice or not. The 1st and 2nd graders sit over by the window. They can see the church parking lot. So the 8th graders say, okay, you 1st and 2nd graders got to get up every once in a while and look and see whether Leonard has come to look at the ice, because we know his habits. If it ain't fit to skate on, he ain't even come to look at it. So anyhow, by 10 o'clock in the morning, Leonard's usually been there, and everybody knows by that time, if the 1st graders are doing their job, that they're going to be able to go skating at dinner. So, and well, one time Leonard doesn't get there until right at noon, and he got mobbed like Santa Claus. Because he knew if he showed up, because he wasn't going to go look at it if it wasn't going to work. We're going to waste his time. Okay, that's one school story.
Well, let's move on to the next one.
That's the mail wagon that they had here in Augusta, I guess in the 20s, maybe teen, 20s. And that thing, they put warm rocks in there in the wintertime to try to ward off the cold, because that would be one cold bear sitting there. And see, at that time, in the 20s, Augusta delivered mail to Dutzel. And Dutzel was on the Augusta Rural Route, all the way through Dutzel and then back on down what was then the St. Charles-Marthasville Road, before Highway 94 got there. But I've got a letter at the house addressed to my grandfather, Charles Ellenbeck, that lived in Dutzel Bottom, and it is addressed to Augusta, such and such a box in Augusta, Missouri. But it was written, the rest of the letter is written in German.
I have a odd question then. Can you remember a time when you got a piece of mail that was very special to you? That you were either excited to get, or when you got it, it was news that was...
I've had an awful lot of them I didn't want to get.
Super excited. Well, something, or something that just sticks out in your memory, being like, oh, I was trying to connect the
My
mail story.
military discharge.
There you go. Touche, that was a good one. All right.
Volunteer. Tony Olson. Okay. Yeah, I wonder if that was caught with the jugging, or no, they caught it with a pole. Okay, pole line. Because when the river was next to Augusta, they would jug fish quite a bit. Follow jug fishing. All you do is take a glass jug and tie a line to it and just try to swim away with it. But they caught some pretty good sized one, because a couple ex-slaves caught one time that weighed 105 pounds, and they got it into a wooden skiff. You flop a 105-pound fish around a wooden skiff, you're lucky to have your boat left. And then they went fishing sometime later, and they followed another one, pulled it up. Finally, one said to the other, "We can't take this one in; it's just too big." So, those fish stories never quit. Sarah's got them back there. Well, she's got a real good story, and I ought to tell this one, that she banded a fish down at St. Genevieve a bunch of years ago, and they caught it up in Nebraska this year. Blue catfish. That's your story. You can tell that when you get
All right, next.
Okay, Walnut Street.
1910.
Okay, that's John Myers' store to your left there. And it probably was Carl Wenker's at one time too. See, at Carl Wenker, he passed away in September of 1908, I believe. Let's see, the old, I don't know what the next building was the post office, and I remember, I don't know what it was doing there at that time. Of course, the next one is the lumber company in a funeral parlor at that time. Let's see. Yeah, the Ebenezer Church is there. And of course, let's see, the Clay house there, that was that house with the white fence on. That is where Dr. Calvin Clay lived when he was a doctor here. The house that's known as the Clay house past there, that was his father's house.
So this is the Matson.
Okay, this is approaching Matson. Yeah, of course, Matson. Of course, they've got the water tank, their tender loader right there, and of course, they filled that tender from the lake that was up in the holler. Katy had several lakes like that, one here, one at Mocaine, and one at New Franklin. They were pretty much carbon copies of this one. That's where Matson, the town, or the railroad decided that's where they was gonna put it, they would build a town around it. Yeah, yeah, there's, let's see, what did I break there?
That's the feed store.
There's a story out there.
Probably.
Good catch.
They had a grain explosion in there one time, and it didn't get very far. You know, grain explosions, they're usually the little one first, and then the room shakes, and then the whole building leaves. This one here, just the little one was all that went off, and there wasn't enough dust around to shake it, to get it going again. Let's see, what else? Most of the stuff it would take so long to tell the story here, I don't think that anything would be worth the time it takes to get there.
Okay.
But yeah, Elmer Litkemeyer, he played baseball as a young man. My mother talked about him, Dad talked about him. And, he was a first baseman. Good field, very little hit, but Dad remembered that. And that was Daniel Boone. How much do you want to know about 1942?
I guess we want to know.
Well, one thing that happened in 1942 in the spring, it had to do with the railroad. This was at night, and it was in the spring, and the train was heading west from Augusta, and the creek was up some at Bigelow Creek. Water was coming up, was between the ties, and the engine went through it. But by the time the caboose got there, the water was deeper. Those old cabooses, they had a generator that ran off the back wheel, and off the top of the back wheel, the water was deep enough to put the lights out in the caboose because the generator was underwater. So you know how tall a tire, the wheel on the train is? It got that deep that fast there. And that's why one of the things that Grandpa did, see, those years you could get a river report at, they would read it at 7 o'clock in the morning, and by the time they would get all their calculations done about a forecast, and it would be noon or 11 o'clock before they'd have all their figures together to figure out what the stage should be the next day. Grandpa Struckhoff didn't like to wait that long to find out what was going on, so he went down to the depot at night. They had a night agent, stayed there all night, and they run on teletype. And see, the railroad isn't interested so much in your long-term forecast. What they want to know is how much the river's going to raise in the next 8 hours, the time that it takes to get a freight train together in the yard in St. Louis, and to get it up to New Franklin, where it can cross the river and get out on high ground. So they're looking for a 12-hour forecast or a little less. So they're always keeping up to date, and their maintenance crews are measuring the water, how far the water is away from different bridges and different crossings, and how much it's got to go to get on the track and stuff like that. So he figured out that if he could get onto their language, what they were using for their measuring points, he could figure out what the stage would be the next morning, 18 hours before he could get to the river. Now this don't mean a whole lot today, but at that time there were like 11 or 12 farmsteads in Augusta Bottom between Augusta and the county line, and those people needed, if they was going to have to move out, they was going to need a little more time than just, or at least the 12 hours extra would really help, put it that way. So that's what they would do. When the river would come up, they would go to the, and these night agents, after 10 o'clock at night, they're telegraphing dead, so that they could just sit there and them telegraph operators sit there and just maybe it was like working on internet today. And they would just shoot wool over, you know. And but they're here, they were actually doing things and having effect on what the river was going to be doing in the next 24 hours. So that happens, and that went on. See, they found out in 1903 when the river was raising here, they found out from the railroad that it was already falling at Boonville, at New Franklin. And it didn't take very long where they got the idea that they could tell what was going to happen if they, so then from 1900 until, or 1903 up until my dad did this, in the mid to late 40s yet, they were still doing that. They would go there, one river, they wouldn't do it every night, just one river.
I only have a question since we have this license plate up. Did you save license plates?
What?
Did you save any of your license plates?
We got a 1922 license plate, but we never saved it. It's still hanging there. We didn't save it in the first place. That's somebody else.
What was your favorite vehicle?
My favorite vehicle. I mean, that I owned or driven?
Oh, I don't know. Both?
One that works.
Yeah, you took that first, the one that honest. I guess probably maybe that 61 Chevrolet might have been. That was, but Dad wrecked it, so.
So that was it. Just figured I'd ask.
What year was your other truck that you had for so long? Chevrolet?
Well, I've had a bunch of trucks so long. I had a 1948 Ford F5, which was a grain truck. I had that. And Ron, or your dad, got that kind of, after I blew the motor up on it, he got it. And this pickup truck, my brother Mark had it, and his brother-in-law Lou Sarrett had it before I did. I got it in 1984, I guess.
Is that the green one?
Yeah.
Floorboards?
Yeah. Yeah, well, see, that thing has very good floorboards now because I took the bottom out of a grain elevator and welded that in. But really, the truck I really liked the best was the 61 and 67 International. I like that one better, but it's gone. Cars, actually the car I liked the best that we've had between all of us, or between Dad and myself, is the 55 Chevrolet.
Wish you still had that, huh?
Yeah, if we still had it, but my sister run the heck out of it, so it's done.
All right, Don, what's next? Do you know whose house that is?
That house there looks
It's
like
at the corner.
Elliot Dibbert's house.
What's the size?
It's it says Mount Pleasant.
Yeah, well, that's Elliot.
So I think that's
Yeah, that's
Jackson and
Elliot Dibberts owned that house and lived in there. He was, let's see, he farmed the ground in the bottom of the town. Let's see, what else did he do? When I knew him, he was pretty much retired already, so.
Is there a connection with this house in Lehman?
Lehman was his son.
His son,
Yeah.
okay. Any stories with that?
Not a whole lot. He was just a guy.
It's just
I mean, I was like a teenager. He was in his late 30s, I think. Thereabouts. But I'd run into him. He worked for Elmer Little.
Yeah. Okay.
How much you want to know about that bill?
A lot.
Whatever you gotta say.
Well, it gets pretty long, but let's start with the town. The fire department at the time, after they got the fire pumper, they thought they needed a bell because right now, or at that time, if they had to spread the alarm, they would spread the alarm by using the United Church of Christ bell. If that happened at the wrong time, or close to church time, people wouldn't know that there was a fire. Anyhow, it would continue ringing, you would figure it out eventually. Anyhow, they told the town of Augusta what they needed for a fire bell, and town ordered a fire bell for them. I believe the thing cost $94 at the time. That was like 5 months or thereabouts after they bought that fire hand pumper. So,
What year was that?
1905.
1905?
Yeah.
Right after we started in 98.
But
That was right after we were organized.
Want to start talking about fire department more than that? Because,
Sure.
see, the fire department, before there was a fire department, the town of Augusta had ladders, and they had hooks, and they had buckets. And, well, that's about what you can use, because unless you got a water source, the only thing you can do is tear the buildings that are burning down and get them out of the way so they don't light everything else. Well, it got started at the time it did. It was a case of need and opportunity colliding. In Union, in 1890, they had a flue fire in the county courthouse in February, and they didn't really have much to put it out, but they did get it out. By April, they had delivered 2 pumpers. The town of Union bought one, and the Franklin County bought one too. And they cost $250 each, and they were identical. So, but about 1900 or thereabouts, the city of Union developed had a municipal water system. So they had 10 times as much water as what these pumps could put out, so they thought they could get rid of one. So the Augusta, in August of 1904, had a town council meeting. They sent 2 guys over to Union to look at the thing and see what it might be worth, and they settled on a price of $175. So they bought one. But they dickered on it a while because the city of Union paid their fare going across 25 cents going across the river. So, anyhow they got it here, and then the town bought the thing, but they knew that it was going to take 12 people to make this thing operate. And you get it takes 8 people to pump it, or to man the pump, and then it takes another guy to squirt water, another guy to maybe find water, and then plus people that might be salvaging stuff. Anyhow, it's takes a lot of people, and they realized that they didn't have that many people floating around in town during the day, but there would be people from outside of town there, and so they opened up membership and use of that fire pumper to anybody in the Augusta area. And all you had to do was pay 50 cents one time, and you were a member for life. Basically, that's the way it was set up. Of course, you run out of money doing that because people don't die that quick. Anyhow, they said that well, it went along like that. They were getting donations, and people were existing. They were keeping these pumps running. Didn't take all that much money. They had to put a new front end underneath at one time, and the thing didn't really fit. It wasn't as wide as a regular buggy, so if you had ruts, the thing didn't fit. It was like, your normal buggy was like 57 inches wheel tread, and this thing was a little less than 4 feet. So one wheel would always be in a hole, and you could see on the pictures of it that this thing had been turned over, so it had met some ruts, had speed, flipped over. So it was,
John, how long have you been volunteering for the fire department?
well, the first time I went, first time I went into a house that was burning, and we didn't want it to burn, was in 1959. But I've been coming to training for 2 years before that.
And I heard that you guys put off doing your training tonight and did it yesterday, so they could all be here with you tonight? Is that right?
I didn't hear nothing about that.
Am I right?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
good.
all right.
So everyone's here with you.
You guys ain't nobody there?
Next picture, we're gonna go way back in time.
Okay.
Any relation?
Well, there's gotta be some.
Okay. What do you see
Yeah,
here?
what you got there is, I don't know who that section crew is, but that's probably fairly early. Our neighbor was Marvin Bratton was the section chief here, or the section foreman. Guy said when they were working there out of Augusta, he said they would spend 50% of their time either right past the end of Hackman Road, between Hackman and Sander Road, and then right above Bigelow Creek. Those were the spots that were giving it the most trouble. The reason why was that there was always, that was mud underneath there, and they put tons and tons and tons of rock in there. But after so many train trips over it and everything keep on sagging, they kept doing that up until the 1970s. And they'd all trainloads of rock and just keep dumping it and then just keep going down. And well, the other thing about it is the train cars kept getting heavier as time went along too. So that was something. And it's they had said too, yeah, when the weather was real cold in wintertime, those tracks were both, they were 40 or 79 feet long, they got the rail work, and they got a joint with 4 bolts in, or 2 bolts on each, and there's a joint with 4 bolts going through it, and when the temperatures would get real cold, the metal would start to contract, and they would have to make sure that these track joints were loose. So when it got below zero, them guys are out with wrenches trying to make sure that, because if they didn't, those tracks would buckle, and then they would have a train wreck. And it could do it in summertime when it's hot too, but usually when things start expanding, them joints would expand too, so they didn't have very much trouble with it.
Does everyone know what picture this is?
No.
Do you know, Don?
No.
Boone Spring,
No.
over at Coing property?
Behind that.
Oh, I was to the outside of that place, but I've never been,
Well, hey, now we know.
never seen it.
There we go.
That ain't Paul Bernice, is it?
Yeah, it was painted by Kim Alsop and framed by Brian Watson.
Okay, right, yeah.
I'm not sure who's holding up the piece.
Now, this was where Paul and Bernice had their wedding reception. It's still noisy like that.
That's here.
That's here, yeah. Who are they?
They're hunters.
They're hunters, but
You recognize anybody?
that's what the guy in the middle. What's his name? He went along with my uncles, my great uncles, to a hunting trip down the Ozarks, but I can't remember what his name is. They went down there, they went deer hunting. Deer at that time was not anyone around here. So my uncle said, well, he said, they had a guide out there, and they could see deer, but they wasn't never close enough to shoot. And he thought, I wonder if I'd offer the guide a little more money whether we could get close enough to shoot. He said, I offered him a little bit more money, and he said, you know, he got me so close I could shoot him without aiming. He said, I wondered whether I overpaid the guy. Yeah, that's, my dad is to the right. And the other guy, his father, Adolph Ronge, he was a parish pastor in the
Dad's to the
1930s.
left. Dad's on the left side.
Yeah, Dad is on our left, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And,
The Summerall Road.
well, I hate to say it, but I was there when that place burned.
Was the name,
The first one.
the name was changed?
No, the Happy Glen, that was Happy Glen School. And right where that thing is sitting now, there was a schoolhouse that burnt there the day after Bill Sadler's house caught fire in 1995. I'm pretty sure 1995. Dave, you were there at Bill Sadler's fire, yeah. And that fire was the next day. And they basically rebuilt it. Let's see, who was the teacher out in Happy Glen? Earl, say Jan. Wasn't Earl Mumford's sister?
Hazel and Audrey.
She taught at Happy Glen, not?
They were both teachers there.
Okay, all right.
Hazel and Audrey.
Right.
Where's that schoolhouse at?
It's on Lowell Road, off Schleusburg.
Yeah, yeah, it was a,
That way, Lowell. Kind of by Boone Valley Golf Course.
okay, let's see.
Tinker Tom?
That's,
Got any stories?
trying to think, that ain't old man Short, Tom?
Oh, Tom Thompson.
What?
Tom Thompson.
Tom Thompson, okay, right, that could be. Yeah, with Cubs, yeah, that would be Thompson.
Okay, that was the curveball, I guess.
Yes.
All right, next. Hey,
And that's Walter, isn't it?
it is. We interviewed him.
Yeah,
He's been in the hot seat, just like you.
yeah. He handled it better.
I think you both have done great.
That is Fritz Schmidt. I'm pretty sure that was, let's see, who would be related now to him?
It's not late.
He was Oswald Conjurlong. He was my neighbor's son. And he was his wife was my, what was,
When this picture popped up, I heard a lot of conversations going, so that means there's good stories with this
Glenda,
lady.
yeah, that would be Glenda Stelzer's great uncle, I guess.
Any fond memories of the Smithy?
Of Fritz Smith, no, he passed away in the, about 1930. So he was fire chief in mid-20s. So, and I looked for his signature on that, when he repaired that front end on that pumper, but I didn't find it. Well, that's ours.
Struckhoff Family Farm.
Yeah,
Established, I'm reading it for people who are watching, 1927.
yeah. Okay, the names of these girls, the one on that end, on the left side, is Ethel Struckhoff Schmidt. The one on the right side is Dorothy Coleman Bozenius. And I think the second one from the right, I believe, is Angela Kuku Nuggy. but the others, I don't know. The guy sitting on the bench is Leonard Holman. And, but look at the box next on that white building, look at the box there. That's the entrance of a 32-volt light system. They had a generator set up over in one of the sheds, and they had the whole compound wired up to that. About the only thing with 32 volts that you could get would be lights, because trying to run anything else would take such a big cable and wouldn't work. Yeah, there's another picture of the power pole set in different ways, and you can actually see the lines going to it on another picture. I don't know whether they got the picture here or not. That picture is Dave Oversmith's spring house, or spring reservoir. Now that thing was put there in the it was a bricked out and rocked out one first. And they replaced it with this concrete one in the mid to late 20s. And what this thing does, the spring runs underneath this thing, and they managed to capture the spring, and it always feeds in there. And the way they used that water, it was a lot of water, that they had a pipe running down the stream, the lower elevation, and they had what they called a ram on there, and that was a device that allowed water to start moving in that pipe, and then it would shut it off, and then they would valve some of the water to go up the hill. So they used water to pump water. If you have enough water, that would work. So they had enough water out of this to feed or water about 30 head of cattle and about 85 or 90 hogs most of the time. When you would go up there, it would be the reservoir that they used was a concrete trough up on top of the hill, and there would be a stream of water running out of there, maybe as big as in my little finger, but it ran 24 hours a day. So they didn't have to pump and carry water. That's Augusta's first motorized fire truck. They made a bunch of, that's a 1938 Chevrolet. It come from Eureka. They made a bunch of efforts to try to buy a fire truck, but they didn't have enough money to do it for a bunch of times. And then they decided that 10 men that were on the fire department decided they would kick in $10 a piece and start a fund to buy a truck. And this truck cost $500, and this was bought in 1942. It was, but it cost $500, so it didn't run. So they got the milk delivery truck, or the milk pickup truck that brought milk into St. Louis. When those guys come back from St. Louis, they went to Eureka and hooked up this thing and pulled it to Augusta. But not without incident, because Bud Struckhoff got a ticket from the State Highway Patrol on 66 for pulling a truck with too long of a chain. So they brought it back to Augusta, and of course the engine had to be completely rebuilt. And they noticed that the drive line, well, this gets kind of involved, but anyhow, they wound up spending $1,400 to get the thing to run, and then they found out, and well, what they had a problem with is the drive line to the pump was crooked, and they couldn't get it up to maximum speed, or to get the pump to pump enough water, because it was a power takeoff pump, which we're going to get familiar with. And well, you see the hose that they had. The only hose that they had otherwise on that truck was 1.5 inches. The suction hose was wrapped around a squirrel tail going around the front of the hood. And so that's about as much water as what you could get rid of at that time. So there was 150, 180 gallons a minute at the most. And, well, a few years later, they did buy a portable pump that they could get closer to cisterns with, because you got this thing out on the road, you can't get it up to a cistern. Where that hand pump, you could roll it right up to it. And so in other words, they had to change what they were doing and spend more money. Now that portable pump cost $400 and they didn't have money, so they was going to borrow it from the bank. And then Herman Sarah, who lived out there where Gary McWilliams lived, been a farmer a long time. He was in his 70s. He was listening to the guys talk. He says, well, why borrow money from the bank? He says, I'll buy your pump. And he says, you can pay me $70 a year until we get it up. So that's what they wound up getting that pump.
Well, we're about halfway done with photos. You ready?
Okay.
Or more?
This is a play at Immaculate Conception. Now, who all these people are, I don't know. I know Dad is sitting there with a vest. He's sitting at the table. And he's made up there by his own self. Because the way this play's plot is, they have a butler, and there these two people, this man and his sister, are home by themselves, and their parents are gone, and the butler asked for the night off. So and then these two people, I think, on the right are a couple that they know that are quite high society, and they have to have a butler. So his dad's character decides that he's going to make himself up like the butler, and they won't know the difference. Well, the thing about it is, he makes himself up on stage to look like the person that his other butler is. And after a while, of course, the butler comes back, and he's got these kind of like noises off where these people are going in and out of it. One butler goes out of one door and he comes in out of another one. And it just keeps going like that. And anyhow, trying to make yourself up on stage while talking about something else, you've got to be able to act and do that.
So this is in the upstairs of?
Yeah, this is the upstairs,
There's a stage and it's like a gymnasium up
and
there?
what year this would be is probably, the name of the show is The Time of His Life. We got the script, yeah, we got the script out. We got about 6 other ones.
Why do you think they built such an elaborate theater at the school there?
Well, it had to do with Father Strauss.
That's exactly what
He said that to get your choir to enunciate their words, you have to get them on stage and get them to act, and you have to beat the pronunciation into them so they pronounce their words. That was basically what he said that the reason for that was. It would still work today, I imagine.
For sure.
That's incredible.
This might be a very, yeah, right.
Okay, this is,
Locust Street.
yeah, I know it's Locust Street, but with the horses in that car at the same time, it's got me befuddled.
Yeah, it's kind of like.
That ain't the parade route.
It could be,
It could have been,
because it maybe started up here and then went down,
but
Hackman to.
usually the Centennial Parade started up here and went that way. A lot of the old later parades started down here and come this way. I can't see the make of the year. That car, I can't figure out exactly what year it is, but it's got to be mid-50s or early 60s.
Okay.
Yeah, that store was one of the Augusta fires that we had. That store caught fire in October of 1941. There were people living upstairs.
Harold and Louise,
What?
Harold and Louise
I think
Hifmeyer.
lived upstairs.
Uh-huh.
And they were standing out on that balcony on the east side when and hollering for help. And then somebody heard them. And then they come and some of the urban need user had a ladder and was able to get them off that balcony anyhow. And then it was burning inside. They could see the flames, and from the back porch, the back door, but they couldn't get at it with a nozzle. Well, they couldn't get in there. It was just smoke. It smoked up so bad you couldn't hardly see. You had to get down real low to see anything. And then what they finally wound up doing, my dad was there. He said they broke the window on the east side of the building and then shot water against the wall. And what really was happening with burning was a wastebasket was where the fire had really started. And they shot water against the wall and it splashed down and landed on the fire that was burning. And then, but things were really hot inside because when my dad went in there, he said that every bit of paper above the level of the counter was charred. You couldn't read any. All the can labels and everything else was done or burned off. He said there was an open ticket book laying on the counter that had basically charred, but there was one that was closed and it was not charred. And then the lower cans down knee high were not charred. Fire did get into the wall, and they chopped a hole in the wall and got it out. And so what didn't take but about, well, it was about 6 or 7 months after that. That's when they decided they was going to buy a fire truck. and let's see, I'm trying to think of the names of some of the people that kicked money in. Bill Tiemann, Pete Kemner, Arthur Haverkamp, Fred Canarcho, Elmer Lindemeyer, Wilbur Holt, George Tipker, Bill Tiemann, Werner Lowenhaupt. Let's see, I believe Urban Need Eater. But yeah, they borrowed the rest of the money, borrowed the rest of the $1,400 to fix the truck. And they also then had to find a place to put it. You know, that was frost protected. Because that old hand pumper sat next to the jailhouse where the post office is now. And that didn't need to heat because there's no water in there. But that fire truck was going to need water. For the first couple of years they had the fire truck, it spent its winter in Augusta garage. And it was in that, basically where glass shop is now. It sat there. I remember the thing sitting there. Matter of fact, I remember working on it just a little bit because it was up on blocks. So that was 40. I don't think they had that thing running until about 1944. It took a while.
Good info. Thank you.
That's my grandfather, Charles Ellenbeck, and his neighbors sawing wood. That's up in Blitzelbottom. My grandfather is the one in the jacket. He's throwing the sawed-off piece over to the pile to the left. I think the guy standing up, straight up there in the middle, I think his name is Hugo Hellebusch. He lives in that house in the bottom picture. And then the guy to his right, I'm pretty sure is Leo Klosmeyer. He lived over, the neighbors were, and the upper picture, you can just barely see a face to the way at the left side of the picture. And that's, I'm pretty sure, is Ted Elbeck, my Charles' son. That is the Augusta Chief car. That's exactly what it says. That, I think, belonged to Frank Kemner. He was fire chief at Augusta, 31, I believe, or thereabouts. That was Paul Kemner's grandfather. And this car, well, I think Otto Buffy bought it from Frank Kemner, and he used it for a fishing car. And then And then they got it back and cleaned it up. We ran it to the State Fire Convention down in St. Charles. Drove it down there to get all the sirens to work on that car. They had 5 sirens on it. We had 5 batteries in the back seat sitting on the floor in the back to try to run these sirens because they're all run off 6 volts and it just grinds everything down.
Do you know who owns it now?
Jan Kennedy, actually it's in Jan's backyard is where it's at. Yeah, it's there. We got other things we got to rebuild yet, so we're working on trucks. So far we get all them done, we might try that. My grandfather, Charles Elton's house, he built that in 1913. They lived down in, before that, where Mom was born was where the bins are at, where you cross the bridge. There was a house there, and that's where they lived. The river was getting close there after the 1903 flood, and they decided they would, rather than buy that place, they would buy it, or they would live here or move to this place. So they built this house. This house was not, where the ground was, the land where it was built on was not underwater in the 1903 flood. That is, let's see, I'm trying to think. The older place, who owned it first, I don't know, what they call it, Roy Geiger owned it, the first one I remember.
House at the end of Hackman Road?
Yeah, it's house on the end of Hackman Road. And they, Mrs. Glenn Byer, Ted and Glenn Byer lived there for a bunch of years. And then Charlie Graneke lived there. That house originally, of course, didn't have that upper white, that was just a single pitch or regular gable roof on there. It didn't have an extra top on it. Charlie put that on there in the late 1880s or 1980s. These, I'm pretty sure, I don't know whether my sister would not be amongst these people anymore because she had black veil at that time. And see, this would be in August or, no, wait a minute. 1961, but I'm trying to think what month.
We go into the month.
Summertime.
Yeah, it's either summertime or early fall, probably August or September. Because they weren't up here the day when, in 61, because we already had turkey supper in the first Sunday of October, dinner ready. That belongs to either Felix Struckhoff or Lyndon Sarah, one of the two. Or, I don't know, maybe Mark's even got it now.
That's Paul saying hi.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Don't forget to donate.
Yeah, let's see.
The schoolhouse?
No, that ain't Happy, or what do you call it, Bacon, not Bacon, but Schoolville, Klondike. It ain't
Herb's
that.
Crossing, the Salem Schoolhouse?
Yeah, it ain't Salem either.
I think that's the one that Paul lived in for a while.
Oh, wait a minute, that did.
It's below the dam.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, see, you wondered sometime why there's a school there, but back when that was a regular run school, there were people that lived out in the bottom, in front of Klondike. That was the river in the 1800s actually went down along the bluff, and then when it got to the end of Hackman Road, practically made a sharp right turn and went across the bottom, and then hit the other side and went down. It started eating off the upper end of it. But in the I've seen a map from the 1880s, where the end of Packard Road is in Doris Bottom. That comes all the way up there, and there's quite a bit of land south of Plumback. Let's see, who farmed out there? Oberdicks, Bergs, Dietrichs, I think, farmed there. See, Schechter's farmed there, Angeloggy's farmed there, Sarrett's farmed there. Let's see, there were a couple other families that moved out of here that I don't remember the names. After they came back, they didn't stay around. Because one of my great uncles lived at the end of Sander Road in 1864, and they started to cave, and they moved from here to Flint Hill, get away from it altogether. And my great grandmother Helena says that when she was a young girl, she worked for an orphan family that had ground that was caving into the river. And one of her jobs that she did was go out and get the cows home in the evening. And they always told her, said, if you see a crack in the ground and a cow standing on or calf standing on the other side of that crack, don't cross the crack. Don't go across. That calf will come back by itself, or else we don't worry about it, because it could fall into the river. Oswald Commercial, he lived right here. That's Glenda Stelzer's grandmother. He told me one time that there was an Angeloggy family that had a Sunday picnic on a riverbank. They sat under a tree out there and had a picnic, and they got back in a buggy. And when they got back to the Augusta Defiance Road that was running along the bluff, they turned back and looked at that tree that they sat under was gone. So it was big chunks. Sometimes it would eat a little bit at a time, and then all of a sudden a big chunk would fall.
I have a question. A minute ago you said Sarah name, and since we're with the museum, do you have anything to add about the Sarah home?
About the Sarah home itself, there was a couple of different families of Sarah's. The one that was, well, they were all kind of related, but a little distantly. The first one that came here, they come up through New Orleans, I know that, and they come up to Mississippi slowly, and they wound up here. Whether this was their original destination, we don't know, because when we looked up some of the people that came here from Germany, they've got records in Germany saying that these people, their destination when they left there was Dutzel, Missouri. They didn't just come here looking for a place somewhere. They knew where they were going to go to. One of my great-grandfather's brothers hurt his arm in a logging accident and couldn't use it. So he went to St. Louis and he started a travel agency. Basically, their job was to arrange a passage for immigrants. And so he would figure out, he said, okay, you want to go here in Missouri? Well, you come from this and this place in Missouri. If you want to be with somebody that's from your area, we'll send you to maybe St. Clements, Missouri, or Augusta, or Dutzel, or St. Albans, or so someplace where if you want to be with somebody that you know, they are there. And they did a lot of that, because when my great-aunts, after the Civil War, there's 5 families decided they would go to Saline County, Missouri, and they hired a boat, loaded up their cattle and things, and went to Saline County. 5 families, and there was a couple of sisters in that, a couple of brothers, and they weren't really married to each other, but they were. There was about 5 different families went in there. Actually, one family has stayed there, and ran into them the other year at a drainage district meeting. But a lot of that happens, that when people move, they just didn't pick up by themselves and do, they took somebody along with them. I don't see anything there telling me about what kind of boat that is. You know, when you talked about landing areas, they talked about Augusta being a landing place for steamboats. There was actually about 4 different landing spots that they had in the Augusta area. There was a Schechter landing that was below, straight out from Klondike. There was a Struckhoff landing that was straight out from where Bob goes down the bottom now. And there was a Reese Camp landing that was up by the county line. And if you wonder why they had to have that many different landing places, if they would tried to ship wheat at that time, it would be shipped in sacks. So you would want to have them loading at a spot where you could get wheat sacks too, because I mean, try to haul them up 3 hills to get to a boat landing didn't make a whole lot of sense. You could drive through some flat ground and get to the boat, because they was going to have to load it on that boat by hand or carried on. And I've seen pictures of the boats, and they've got wheat sacks stacked up that high.
Interesting, I didn't know that there was 4 landings.
Yeah, and one thing that, there was also a Feldman landing up at Trula, or at the piers. And some of these landings really had a lot to do with their steamboat wood supply, because there was wood to be cut out there in the floodplain, and it was either float or cut it and burn it, or else it's going to float away. And so that's, I don't know how much wood they use, but to move something like that would take quite a bit. To thrash 1,000 bushels of wheat probably took about a wagon load and a half. When you had an efficient, well-run steam engine, would probably take a wagon load and a half of wood. So.
Do you know this location? Madison Cemetery?
No, I've never been inside that.
Does anyone else know?
I've been there.
You've been there? Do you remember any names?
Boy, I have pictures of the
Okay.
graves that are in there.
Yeah,
It was like the,
with the Senator Williams, those people aren't buried there, are they?
it was on a little knob about maybe a half mile back from where the town of Madison.
Yeah. Okay, that Daniel Boone farm there, that was a Senator Williams owned that.
Yes.
And,
We got permission from people that own it now.
okay. I was wondering whether, because he lived there quite a bit, and I'm just wondering whether he was buried there or not. Because there's some stories about him that I won't repeat here.
Next picture.
Okay, we have just come back from a ball game, and we're not tired here. None of you can see by the looks on everybody's face, we really are not in the mood to be having a picture taken.
Well, we're glad you did. It's a great
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah. I have hair on this one, so that puts me about 20, probably 21, maybe. That'd be it.
Do you know who that is? I mean, besides saying.
That's Schindler. Up here on, I never did meet the man.
Darn, because I live on Schindler.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know more.
No, I never did meet him. I worked in that house on top of the hill, but I never did meet him.
What did you do at the
Did he go by the name
house?
Alfred, or did he have a nickname?
What?
Did he have a nickname, or did he go by Alfred?
Al Schindler was,
But I think they named the property Alcat. Because of the cabin.
yeah, he's, let's see, it was a story about him too, but I don't have all the details.
The only story that I had heard was that he had paid some of the school kids to move some wood on the property, even though he didn't really need the wood to be moved, just to help them out.
Okay?
So you worked in the house?
Yeah, well, see, Roland, Dave's dad, did some electrical work. We put a septic tank in there. Or they changed it, they put a new septic tank in there. This was 1962, 63, something like that.
You're pretty good with dates. It's impressive. Inside the bank vault,
That's the old bank house?
the funeral home?
Okay. Yeah, but I wondered whether there was anything left of that because, see, the bank closed in the end of 1931, I think. Because it closed right at the end of the year. A lot of the other banks had already closed around here. Yeah, it was kind of a bad time to close the bank because a lot of people had written a check for their taxes and the bank closed before the tax check cleared. So they wound up not having their taxes paid. And it had repercussions all the way into like the drainage district where people couldn't pay their drainage taxes. And I've got records at the house where my grandfather kept, where people did work on the ditch levee to, they moved dirt or cut weeds or something on the ditch levee to pay their taxes. And some people did it for work or for pay. Some did it to pay their own taxes on. And this apparently went on for about 2 or 3 years from what I can read in the records I had. That is sitting there is my great grandfather, Anton Reeder. That's his third wife sitting there next to him. That's his son, Anton Jr. That's my grandmother, Agnes Reeder there. And the young girl is one of the 22. That's Francis Barlago. Because I don't know if you kept that picture of my his first house, where he lived first, was fairly large. But my grandmother says that there was 22 children that called that place home, and I believe 13 were natural children of somebody that was involved. So, because my great-grandfather was married 3 times. The woman that he married last was married twice before. And and her first husband was Wilhelm Schechter was his name. Her second husband was Franz Krakel. He's the one that built that house behind him. Now, Franz Krakel was a brother to Arnold Krakel, who was a local politician, and he was the head of the Missouri enlisted militia, northeastern Missouri quadrant. And Franz Krakel was a company commander in that unit, and his company was in Dutzel area. And when you started looking up the people that we found that lived in Dutzel, or that we knew lived there, it was like going up and down the road, that everybody belonged to the Missouri enlisted militia. why were they so excited about that? Washington Ferry on the south side, Washington had a militia unit there. On the north side, there was not very many people. And what the North was concerned about is that the South would send some sympathizers from the North, there were Southern sympathizers in Northern Missouri, to the north side of the river at Washington, where there weren't very many people, and they could capture the ferry. They could then take it to Herman and join the Herman ferry, and they could then move a group of soldiers from Herman to Montgomery City, where the North Missouri River had a water and fueling station, and they could cut the railroad there, and then they would have the Missouri cut in half that way. So that's why they wanted to have a fairly strong militia force here in the eastern Franklin County, because four of my great uncles, there was Fritz Hellebusch, Fritz Dickhaus, there was Wilhelm Schechter, and there was Henry Barloggy, were members of that thing. One of my great-great-grandfathers was a member. Two of my great-grandfathers were members of it. So, and they were, and this one was not one of them. He had 13 children at that time to take care of, so he wasn't going to be doing anything about that. And see, his first wife was an Albers. She had several children. When he married her, she died. The second wife was a Barloggy, and they lived to the north side of where the airport, or the south, or the east side of where the south end of the airport is. He lived, boy, this is getting me. You know where the billboard is at the bottom? That when you come from Washington, first billboard you hit, and there's a road that heads back toward the levee. Well, where that road hits the levee, that is where his original house was. So, and so he would live there. And the story was that in the Civil War, when the soldiers, the Confederate soldiers were milling around the depot, there was a group of bushwhackers came in. The Missouri militia at that time was already headed for Warrenton. That was their job, to protect the Northern Missouri River. Anyhow, these bushwhackers came into a place called North Washington. It was about 12 buildings on the bank of the river across the depot over there. And they started shooting at these people that were milling around over by the depot, and of course those people started shooting back. And my great-grandfather had said that in 10 minutes there wasn't any windows left in the houses in that were facing the river. But if you think about that a little bit, they were shooting 50 caliber mini balls. To get them things to fly over 100 yards and hit a doorway is hard to do. And I mean, these people, they either shot an awful lot of times to get that much, because you couldn't hardly hit a house from that distance with something like that. I don't think they had that much ammunition.
Lots of great info, thank you.
I don't know whose fingernails those are.
Well, you're supposed to guess.
What?
It just says guess.
That's
Well,
yours.
Oh, yeah. They're not mine.
That's a tractor with a cab. That's a Kubota with a cab. It's got to be that's the only ones. Montel's got them, but I don't know whether that people who ain't authorized driving.
You don't know who it is.
No.
Remember, these are like flashcards.
No, this is.
That or Paul's testing you. Slip scraper?
That ain't a slip scraper. That's something that's made to be picked up. No. Well, it might be a real heavy slip spreader. Man, that'd be a 4-horse and 2 men to hold that. Yeah,
Well, I think it's in Matson.
Instead of barn, and that's,
okay, yeah. Yeah, it would take that to, and if something that big, it'd almost take 6 horses to pull that.
probably would.
And then by the time you have that much dirt in it, you almost have to have a special lever to get out of the ground so it wouldn't dig to China. That's the Augusta, their first pumper. That's what it looks like now. When we had it here, it was painted gray. I don't know if you can see the dents in that tube that's up in the top where that suction hose sticks into. Those are where they left them in there because we told them that's what happened when it turned over.
Well, we got 10 more pictures left. You can hold up.
That is, was it 1927? That's an owner store. Or that can't be 1903.
Does anyone else know?
Railroad came through in what, 1880?
Yeah, 1890s. I mean, it was there.
No historical business shortly after the railroad.
Yeah. But what I'm wondering about, the way the people are dressed, her dress is just a little short for 1903.
Well, there's a flood.
There's high water.
There's high water, yeah.
See your ankles.
They ain't dumb. You can't, what the guys are wearing, you really can't tell. Could that be, well, let's see it. Well, let's go by the high water marks. You get 1903, 1904, 1908, 1915, 1922, 1927. I don't think that would be as late as 1935. But the water has to be almost that high just to get there. I mean, it has to be almost 29 feet at Herman for the water to get around that store like that.
No, there's still grain beds, huh? It was before the railroads.
And that wasn't a local rain flood. I don't believe it. It looks a little bit too, well, you don't have boats sitting out there like that with local
Yeah, we got
rain.
the rain to be flash flooded.
Yeah. There's a lot of other places for water to go that just stand right there. It's like,
So we have a real brain scratcher on this one.
but I was looking at the other building. That's Google Willenbrick's buildings on the left side. The house is the thing in the back there. I guess there's a barn on this side of that.
Okay, let's move on.
Yeah, I'd go back to that one. Let's see. Auto Pepsi sitting in the middle.
Mine is in front, is that? And Lambert?
It looks like Land O'Lantern station in the front, yeah.
4th of July parade, 1970.
Could be that. Is that, the guy sitting in the middle there is, George.
Well, the two gentlemen in the middle back and the front back, we don't know who those two gentlemen are.
The one in the,
So the two that you can barely see their heads. We're still wondering. This is actually hanging up at the museum
yeah,
on the veteran wall, and we haven't identified those two.
I've got a list of all the World War I veterans that we found in cemeteries.
Norby was over here the other day and helped. But I don't think we figured out who those two gentlemen were.
No,
No,
name?
this is 1970, so these guys are, they're every one of them 70 years old at least.
All right, we'll move on to the next one.
Now, there you have Robert and Rosa Parks. She was, Robert, I didn't, well, of course he died before the barn. He farmed down the bottom. See, his wife, she was a midwife for years. I mean, I've heard older people say that, they said, yeah, I said, your family, when there's kids 8 years old in the house, if Mrs. Parks come to visit your house, you were going to have a baby. It was well known in the community.
What was that? That was Bob Parks, who worked at Depot down here.
That was her son. That was Rosa's son. And see, man, he farmed. That's about all I know.
This is the Howell Garage.
That's how
The town of Howell.
yeah, I never was there, or at least, well, that was how. That's Father Jasper. He was the first pastor first resident pastor at the Baptist Seminary. I think he's the one that ordered, or that he needed a mule or a team of horses, and he bought a set. And I think he knew somebody in St. Louis County that had a team for sale and a buggy too, so he bought them. And they came this way with them, and they got to Defiance, and one of the horses come down with a blood poisoning, locked up. Never got the thing home. Mops Ford? Melvin, or Marvin Ford does. Yeah, he lived in next to Greg and Rachel's, that house there, they lived, when he was a kid, they lived down there. And then when they moved from there, they moved to where Dale Heining lives now.
Sally's wondering.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
He lives there, his house was across from us.
Across from there?
Yeah, across from us.
Okay, but, yeah, she said in that time, she said, she remembers in 1929, they had a flue fire in that house. And he said it took him 4 hours to get that fire out. And I thought, well, we wish you would have told us that day we were there with the flue fire in that house, because we could have used some pointers. Yeah, Lester Miter-Sagan's, see, their dad was Hugo Miter-Sagan. They lived up in the bottom. Actually, they lived on where Riverview owns down the bottom there now. They farmed there a while, and then later they farmed what Herman Sarah owned, was up in, closer to Love, on the lower side of the road. That's what Ted and Wayne Struckhoff own now. That's Immaculate Conception Church. That picture was taken probably before 1914 or about that time, because you see where that chimney is on the front, or the front corner of the church. That chimney is now onto the back. And apparently what they did when they built the church, they didn't have a furnace in there. They used a big stove in the back end of the church to try to heat it. And then they tore that chimney out of there when they put that new heating system in. And at that time, they put new altars in too, I think.
But we have one more photo. Trick question.
If that is slaves, I got another slave story for you. Because one of the things my grandfather says is that they had slave auctions at the edge of the bluff, just west of Nova.
I'm confused. How does that tie into Earth?
A picture of the world.
That ain't a picture of the world. I'm looking at the back of a man. A black man sitting right there.
Good imagination.
It is, but
I'm kidding.
I mean, if that was put there for that, man.
I'll study the picture later.
Yeah.
So we're at the end of the slideshow, quizzes for Don. Does anyone have any questions? I know there are some. Go ahead.
You mentioned the jailhouse next to the post office.
Yeah.
What was our law back then, and who enforced it, who put people in jail, and, did we have a sheriff?
Well,
we have
we had a town.
any good stories that go with the jail?
Well, for one thing that nobody realizes and don't think about, before Augusta was incorporated as a town, it's been from 1830 to 1855 as an unincorporated town. The closest law was St. Charles. So whatever happened here stayed here apparently until we had now. It was town marshal was what we had.
We did have a town
marshal, yes, and they enforced laws, but there was some rules in town that were, peculiar to the town of Augusta too, I'm sure. I went through some of them, but and as far as posses and the sheriff, my grandpa talked about one time they had a group of outlaws that were on the island out here in the river. And the sheriff's deputy said, well, there's two things we really got to worry about. He said, the drunk and the tough guy. He says, I think we got a mixture here. And they said, well, we just went out there and told them, well, they should probably give up because their days of doing what they were doing were done. And he said, well, they come along. And at that time, St. Charles County had maybe 4 deputies at the most. Because when we had the centennial here, I think there was one state, we had 5,000 people in town, we had one state patrolman and one county deputy. And they couldn't talk to each other on the radio, and they couldn't talk to St. Charles either. So if they had to do anything, they had to call on the phone. Yeah. And later on, there was, Dan Kemner, he was town marshal for a while. Let's see, who else before Dan? I think one of the Reeks, Phil Reek, I think, might have been one of the marshals. Sarah was a marshal. And that was in the mid-30s. See, one thing we had, and, well, the firemen all heard this story, so you guys tune out. But, you know, when in the 60s, we had the firemen, and on Saturday afternoon, we get a fire, and the kids were hanging around town with cars, and, well, fire truck would take off, and the kids would follow. And so we'd get to the fire, and, well, the kids would come up, and they'd help, move things, carry things. And then some wouldn't. And then, well, we finally said, man, they really ought to really help. So Earl Moncrut, who was the chief at the time, and Dan Kemner kind of got together and said, you know, what we ought to do is, these kids are squealing tires around town. Maybe what we ought to do is restrict their tire squealing privileges. So what you do, Earl, you take their names down of people who don't help and turn them over to me, and he said the next time they squeal tires, he said, I'll know it. He said, I'll have your name down. And at that time they had a local court, and they didn't take all driving points off your driver's license, so it was free game, and they'd get a $10 fine for squealing the tires. But the people that helped wouldn't get fined. It didn't take too long for these guys were getting called all the time saying, there's something wrong. I can't turn over a rock in this town without getting fined. They couldn't figure it out. So. That would never work today.
Question in the back.
Early on, when your dad and mom settled over here, it was relatively religiously segregated.
Yes, it was.
So how did Beta Agnes end up on the east end of town when her family and your dad's family and your mother's family?
Yeah, and that was over the objections of my grandfather and Dad's mom too, because they owned where the Cleaster,
John and Jerry?
Yeah, her brother owned that place, and he had just died, and so that place was for sale when they moved down here. But they didn't want to go up there for some reason. Well, Dad had farmed this place down here. See, they bought that in 1927. From actually they bought it from Joe Tobin. And you know Barb Alfman? It was her grandfather. And they bought it, and they decided that they would move down here because he had farmed this place and knew it. That's one reason why that he come down here. And yeah, you're right about having religious places being religiously segregated, because the Catholics lived here, Lutherans lived here, and in town a lot of people that went to the United Church of Christ. And like from Defiance on, you didn't really have that many Catholics living there. And there was not only a religious reason for this, there was a school reason for this, because if you had all these people living in one area, they would have one school, or basically you would have one school system for these, one school system for them, one school system for these over there. And that's the way it would work. And actually it got so ingrained in the tax situation that your local tax assessors, that wasn't assessed the way it is today. You had people who came around every year and assessed, did an assessment every year. And what would happen, and it worked both ways, that if you were a Catholic living in a non-Catholic area, your taxes would probably be higher than a non-Catholic person living in that area. The same way would work with a non-Catholic living in a Catholic area. It was basically financially driven that way. It wasn't so much religiously driven, it was financially driven. And that's why, see, Dutzel wound up, they had a public school, basically, Dutzel, St. Vincent was the public school in Dutzel. from the late 1800s all the way to 1947. And like Concord Hill, that was a community to itself there too. Marthasville, a community to itself. And their taxes went in that direction.
Did you guys do any blacksmith work yourself? You guys are also handy. Did you do your own blacksmith work?
Well,
Mr. Holt?
Well, when Holt was alive, we did do our own blacksmith work.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, well, I did some when he was sick there for a while, and then I did some stuff, and we could sharpen our own polish, bend iron, stuff like that. But I mean, you can do that, but dropping right in to a piece of iron, decide this is the piece of iron that I'm going to bend and fit that way, and it's going to be the right kind of iron, and it's going to be strong enough, and the way it's going to break. Holt was way ahead of the curve on that stuff.
And then what did it look like on the inside of the jailhouse?
Well, there was a desk in there. There was a cell. And, I've only poked my nose in there one time. But they had the town board meetings in there. Yeah, oh yeah. And I don't know that there was ever anybody contained there overnight.
That's a good thing.
But,
That's a good thing.
yeah, it probably was. Then again, maybe there's somebody that should have been contained there.
Any other questions? No? All right.
Okay.
Well. Thank you, Thank you. I think we all learned a lot tonight. Right, but we knew this with you. Huh?
Learned a lot as compared to